Recently, in the Credo class I'm teaching, the one in which we respond to provocative questions about values and beliefs, I asked, which is more important, being kind or being truthful? Most of the people in the class quickly objected to putting those two options as a dichotomy. There is no reason, folks responded, you can't do both. If we take the time and effort to be kind and truthful, it's not that hard if you try. But we pressed the question together, acknowledging that we were not asking to pick between being kind or truthful. The question was not, is it more important to be mean but right, or to be a likable liar? Truth and kindness are both important. The question simply asks which one is more important, being kind or being truthful? Which one helps you do both of them well? My answer was to lean a little more toward being kind. I suspect that that is not a surprise to most of you. One of the other participants was very strongly in the kindness camp and explained themselves like this. Truth doesn't need me for it to continue being truth. But kindness is dependent on my action. This made a lot of sense to me. I create kindness. I don't create truth. Truth just exists. I was fairly satisfied with that response and even nudged a little closer to the kindness side of the line after hearing this participant's response. But a few days later, I was unsettled by another thought. Does truth need me? Maybe I don't create truth. Yes, truth simply is and doesn't become more true by any action or belief on my part, and yet there has been a significant increase in the politics of lying lately. The political divide between liberals and conservatives has continued to widen, and one key argument is about who won the 2020 election. It's true that Biden won, but Trump and an array of vocal supporters to continue to promote what I would consider a big lie, that the election was stolen. And that lie has continued to have an impact on the functionality of our government in certain ways. Now, it's certainly an age-old cry that all politicians lie. And while there is truth in that adage, that line usually refers to the way politicians make promises on the campaign trail that they can't keep or don't intend to keep. Or it refers to the way politicians will put a spin on a story, controlling the narrative. But that's not the same as fabricating a narrative from nothing. Something different is going on. All of the lying is still just attempts to manipulate and control people so as to maintain or gain power. Politically, that's what most lying is for. That goes for the campaign trail promise and the news hour spin. But some of what is going on during the previous presidency and the ripples from this lie about the stolen election is bigger and bolder and more dangerous. It's dangerous because the truth is being seen as unimportant, negotiable by people in power or vying for power. And this trickles down to more regular people who perpetuate these lies even though they don't receive the direct benefits of them. Something else is at play as well, something that makes the erosion of truth easier. We're grappling with the way technology has advanced to where we have a remarkable level of access to information. And the problem with that is that there's so much information, it becomes just noise, and we struggle to tease out the signal. There is so much content, it can be almost impossible to find reliable sources of true information, and it is super easy to just find an echo of whatever you already believe to be true. A positive spin on this situation is the way entertainment can provide highly individualized content. If you want neo-traditional bluegrass music, you can find that. If you want Bollywood movies, but just the dance scenes, you can find that. If you want modernized fairy tales featuring only people of color, you can find that. If you want cheesy Hallmark Christmas romance movies featuring LGBTQ plus characters, you can find that. And if you don't want those things, you don't have to see it. Of course, certain people still go out of their way to get offended about representation, but my point still stands. My point being, the expansive availability of niche content is good for entertainment. Unfortunately, that same expansive availability of niche content is a problem when it comes to getting your news and your information about the world. It makes it very easy to confirm your bias and very hard to find reliable sources of real information. It becomes important to ask who wrote this article or this podcast. What perspective or identity are they writing from? When our news is pitched toward customized niche markets, it isn't really news anymore. Misinformation and disinformation has become so prevalent, we can't just take information at face value. We have to question our sources. And I want to be clear that this is not just a matter of politics and social issues. Science is in danger of misinformation and disinformation as well. People seem to consider an opinion about science to carry as much weight as evidence-based fact. Folks delight in questioning evolution and climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccines. And then we can get started on conspiracy theories about historical events such as the Holocaust or the moon landing. In the reading, we heard about propaganda. Propaganda is when a lie is generally accepted as truth because it has been so heavily promoted by a powerful entity. A conspiracy theory is the opposite. It is the revealing of that propaganda. But part of the problem is that when you point out propaganda, you risk being labeled a conspiracy theorist, which is not seen as a positive thing. It's not a positive label. It's a way to discredit people. And it gets tricky. One of the tools of powerful people is propaganda. Another is to discredit another point of view by calling it conspiracy theory. And another is to poke at clearly established truths by concocting conspiracy theories about them to undermine credibility. It gets very convoluted. The trouble comes when there are so many things purported to be propaganda or baseless conspiracy theories that we're left to pick and choose which things are real and which are not, but we have limited tools to uncover this truth. I'll give you an example. I am well convinced that the moon landing was real, but I wasn't there. I don't understand the science of astrophysics. I don't know any astronauts, and I don't work for NASA. I can't do my own research. I can't personally vouch for the reality of the moon landing. I'm left to read and listen and at some point simply trust the information that I have available to me. And I am well convinced that the moon landing was real. Consider a more recent example. A few weeks ago, a hospital in Gaza was struck by a missile. Hundreds of Palestinians died. According to some, the missile was part of the Israeli offensive. Others say that the missile was fired by Hamas and that it landed on the hospital by mistake. There has been little beyond situational or circumstantial evidence available because the hospital is in the middle of a war zone still. The question of truth versus propaganda is an obvious one to pursue at this point, and yet many people don't. We're not getting great clarity about the truth on this particular point of whose missile was that. And we likely will not get much clarity for a long time, which means propaganda will likely hold sway. Our world is filled with injustice and the cruel exercise of power. The question of truth versus propaganda, once you start looking, starts to show up in a myriad of locations. What's happening with people of color in our prison system? Why are trans people being targeted with dehumanizing legislation? Who is opposed to these increased taxations on the super rich? What is the latest buzz with borders and immigration? Who, other than corporations, is promoting this current round of artificial intelligence? In our reading this morning, Caitlin Johnstone reminds us propaganda only works if you don't know it's happening. She calls us to shake ourselves from our propaganda blinders and develop a truth-based relationship with reality. And I'll add the caution that there is no unfiltered source of truth in the news. So watch for the filters. Watch for the angle, the lens being used to bring you the news. This is good critical thinking skills to use on the information you're receiving. Who wrote this piece? And who funded it? You can go a little deeper and ask who benefits from this version of the story, or even whose voice is missing. It may help peel away the layers and get closer to the truth. Unitarian Universalism calls us to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The context of that principle is for religious and spiritual matters, but it applies broadly to all of our living. There are a large number of powerful entities promoting certain perspectives, and generally they do not do so for the good of the Republic or our noble citizenry, but for the good of their own economics, politics, or social advantage. But propaganda only works if you don't know it's happening. So, ask more questions. Investigate the context of the messages you're receiving. Be wary of easy confirmation of what you already believe. Don't assume the truth doesn't need you to defend it, doesn't need you to support it or name it or protect it. Yes, truth crushed to the earth will rise again, but that doesn't mean we can sit back and let those who are crushing it do so on and on and on. Yes, no lie can live forever, but that doesn't mean we must blithely wait for the lies to die before we can live free in truth. Yes, the truth is still the truth even when no one believes it, but that doesn't mean the truth does not need us to support it, to defend it, to seek it always. Friends, it is not easy right now. It feels like a simple message. Everyone in the congregation is going to agree truth is worth it. Truth is important. But friends, the world we live in is stacked against easy finding of the truth. And so, I may be preaching to the choir, but sometimes the choir needs to be reminded of the song or helped back on key so that we can all continue to support one another and that the truth can help us. And so seek the truth, we say. Seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. It will set all of us free. In a world without end, may it be so. Let us join in singing